Here on my porch, at 68 years old, I've come to understand that time doesn't just pass. It settles. It becomes sediment, with every wrinkle a layer of pain and triumph. This arm of mine, even after all these years, still throbs when the wind shifts, reminding me of that one night, reminding me of the man I called my husband and the forest that took him for good. People look for horrors in fiction, but sometimes a true story holds a secret far darker than anything you can make up. My secret rests easy, right alongside the bones they never found, buried deep under the foundation of the life I built from the ashes. If you're listening, wherever you are, comment and subscribe, because some truths have to be heard, no matter how much they hurt. Some stories just have to be told. Brenda, who had worked with me from the beginning, when I only had an industrial stove and a cooler, shyly raised her hand. She always asked me to tell the story from the beginning for the newcomers. She said it was important for everyone to know where we came from. Tell the new girls how it started, Miss Naomi. Tell them about Reggie. A shiver traced its way down my spine. Reggie. While stories of my struggle were the bedrock of these meetings, his name was a ghost we rarely summoned. The old-timers knew it was a forbidden subject, a door best left closed. The younger ones didn't even know who he was. Better that way. Some names are best left buried with their owners. Do you all really want to hear this story again? I asked, my gaze sweeping over the younger girls, some young enough to be my granddaughters. They all nodded, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Even my son, who had heard it 1,000 times, settled in to listen. It seems that stories of survival never get old, do they? Especially when they involve blood, drug money, and a body that was never found. I felt a shiver run down my spine when I heard that name. Reggie. It had been a long time since anyone had said that name near me. The old-timers in the neighborhood knew it was a forbidden subject. The younger ones didn't even know who he was. Better that way. Some names are better left buried with their owners. Do you all really want to hear this story again? I asked, looking directly into the eyes of the younger girls. Some were young enough to be my granddaughters. Many weren't even born when it all happened. They all nodded yes. Even my son, who had heard it 1,000 times, sat down to listen again. It seems that stories of overcoming never get old, right? Especially when they involve blood, drug money, and a body that was never found. I'll go back to 1973, when I was a 16-year-old girl, full of dreams and with my head in the clouds, like every young woman of that era. I was born and raised in a rural town in western Maryland, a place that now has a university, but back then it was just dust, livestock, and plantations. From the age of 12, I worked as a maid in the house of a family of doctors. I slept in the small room in the back, woke up before sunrise, and only went to sleep after the dinner dishes were sparkling. I earned a pittance, but I saved every penny under the thin mattress where I slept. I dreamed of buying a sewing machine and opening my own studio. At that age, I thought sewing wedding dresses was the peak a woman could reach in life. Mrs. Peterson, my boss, was actually good to me, taught me to read better, let me watch daytime television with her. Sometimes, she was the one who took me to get my ID card when I turned 16. Every young lady needs her documents, she would say. Little did I know that that ID card would be my only possession when I ran away from there. A few months later, it was at a block party at the community club that I met Reggie. Nowadays, parties are different, but back then it was more behaved, you know. There were even whole families at the parties. I had gone with the daughter of my boss's neighbor, who was always inviting me to parties. It was my only fun after working all week. He was there, standing, leaning against the wall, looking at me like someone picking fruit at the market. A grown man, 28 years old, at a time when that seemed almost old to me. All dressed up, a pressed button-down shirt, shoes that shone, a gold chain around his neck. Among those boys my age, in shorts and flip-flops, he looked like a television star. "Want a drink, princess?" he asked when he passed by me. I was embarrassed. I had never had an alcoholic drink in my life, but I accepted so as not to be rude. The way he spoke, the way he looked, made me dizzier than any drink could. Reggie said he was a salesman, He traveled selling construction materials all over the state. He had his own car, a beat-up yellow Chevy Nova parked at the club's entrance, drawing more attention than anything else in that quiet town. He told me he had a house in Baltimore, near the waterfront. For a girl who had never seen the ocean, that sounded like a fairy tale. That night, we danced until the party was over. He drove me home, gave me a kiss on the cheek that made my heart race. Before leaving me at the back door, he gave me a piece of paper with his phone number. "Call me if you want to see the ocean," he said. For 3 months it was like that. He would show up on weekends in my town, always well-dressed, always with money in his pocket. He took me to dinner at restaurants where I didn't even know which fork to use. He paid for everything, treated me like a queen. I started skipping work to meet him. My boss noticed, complained, but I was so drunk on passion that I didn't care. It was on one of those dates, in a roadside motel whose name I don't even remember, that I got pregnant. I was 16, knew nothing about life, thought you couldn't get pregnant the first time. Pure ignorance of a country girl. When my period was late, I panicked. In the boss's house, a maid couldn't get pregnant. It was certain dismissal. And my family. My father would literally kill me. I called Reggie crying so hard I could barely speak. I thought he would disappear, vanish into thin air like so many boyfriends do when you show up pregnant. But to my surprise, he laughed on the other end of the line. "And you think that's a problem, princess? I was already planning to take you to the city. Now I have an excuse." 2 days later, he showed up at the boss's door with the yellow Chevy Nova, threw my 2 bundles of clothes in the trunk, and took me away. I didn't even say a proper goodbye. I just grabbed my ID and the savings from under the mattress. A measly amount that wasn't even enough to buy a pair of shoes like the ones he wore. The house near the waterfront was actually a shack on a hill in West Baltimore. At that time, the neighborhood was still small, more peaceful, nothing like what it became later, but it was still a shock. From the clean little room in the boss's house in my hometown, to the 2-room shack with a roof that leaked when it rained. But I was so in love, so happy that he had saved me, that I found everything beautiful. We got married at the courthouse a month later. Me with a still-hidden belly, just turned 17, him 29. On the certificate, I lied that I was 18 to avoid needing my parents' permission. No one checked. No one ever checks these things when you don't want to see a problem. The shack gradually improved. Reggie brought construction materials almost every week. He said he got them as gifts from clients or that they were leftovers from deliveries. Soon we had brick walls, a roof that didn't leak, even a real sofa. The salesman job seemed to pay well, although he never let me see how much he actually earned. He only gave me the exact money for the market and the bills, and barely that. It was after Michael was born in 2074 that I started to notice the first cracks in the fairy tale. Reggie started going out more and more at night. He would come back at dawn, smelling of booze and cheap perfume. When I once asked where he was going, I got my first slap in the face. "Are you spying on me now? I'm out on the street earning money to support you and this kid. What do you want? For me to stay here changing diapers?" It was just a slap, but the shock was as great as if it had been a punch. No one had ever raised a hand to me before, not even my father, who was tough. I cried all night, the baby crying along, as if he understood his mother's pain. In the morning, Reggie brought flowers and chocolates. He apologized, said he had drunk too much, that work was stressful, that it would never happen again. I believed him. Of course, you always believe the first time. The nightly outings continued, the money increased, the house improved, new clothes appeared, but the story of being a construction material salesman no longer held up. Who sells cement and bricks at dawn? And why so much cash always in his pocket? "It's because the clients pay in cash," he would answer when I asked. "It's construction business you wouldn't understand." West Baltimore was changing along with my life. More shacks appearing, more people arriving, some basic services appearing, and along with them the first more organized drug spots, the first clashes between gangs, the first shootouts. In 2077, when I was already pregnant with my second son, Daniel, I had to throw myself on the kitchen floor with Michael under me to protect him from the bullets whizzing outside. Later, Reggie appeared at home all agitated, sweaty, with a cut on his forehead. He said he had been in a car accident coming back from work. What work, Reggie? Tell me the truth. What do you really do? This time, it wasn't a slap. It was a punch to the stomach that left me breathless, lying on the floor. 3-year-old Michael crying in terror in the corner. I was so afraid of losing the baby I was carrying in my belly that I didn't even react. I just stayed there, curled up, protecting my belly with my hands, while he screamed horrible things. Never question me again. I took you out of that shitty life in the country. I gave you a house, I gave you everything. What are you complaining about? The 82nd arrived, and with them, hell itself. Drug trafficking exploded all over the city, and West Baltimore was no exception. It was no longer that peaceful neighborhood. It was a disputed territory, with different factions trying to control the area. And Reggie didn't even bother to hide it anymore. The friends who came to the house, the packages he hid, the guns I sometimes caught a glimpse of. I knew, of course I knew, but I pretended not to, because fear had already taken root inside me. He isolated me gradually. First, he cut off contact with my family in the country, then with the few friends I had made in the neighborhood. He would invent that one had spoken ill of me, that another was hitting on him, that one was a police informant. In the end, I only talked to the children and to him. My woman doesn't need friends. I'm your family now. The silence he built around me was more suffocating than any physical wall. It wasn't just the lack of friends, it was the death of my own thoughts. I learned to measure my words, then to stop speaking them at all. I became a ghost in my own home, my opinions fading until they were whispers only I could hear. The children learned it too. They learned the art of being invisible, of stifling their laughter, of communicating with me through glances, a shared language of survivors. Fear became the air we breathed, and I started to forget the woman I was before him. Was she brave? Did she have dreams? I couldn't remember. There was only Reggie's wife, a creature of reflexes and silence. It was around that time, maybe 2083 or 2084, that I truly understood the depth of his deception. He had this large plaster eagle in the living room, almost as tall as a child. He called it his protector. One night, when he thought we were all asleep, I saw him go to it. He turned the statue carefully and reached into a hidden compartment at its base. I held my breath. I saw him pull out wads of money and what looked like small bags of drugs. That eagle wasn't a saint. It was a safe. The truth I had long suspected was staring me right in the face. My husband wasn't a salesman. He was a major drug dealer. The fear that washed over me was cold and sharp. That eagle, which I had to dust every day, was a monument to the lie we were living. It was then that the first desperate thoughts of escape began to truly take root. I began to realize that he even controlled when I went to the corner store to buy bread. If I was 5 minutes late, it was an interrogation, an accusation, a shouting match. Sometimes, when he left, he would lock the door from the outside, saying it was for my own good, that the neighborhood was dangerous. Me and the children, prisoners in our own home. I spent 2 months planning everything in minute detail, collecting coins left over from the market, hiding them in a hole I made under the laundry sink, memorizing bus schedules when I went to the bus station with the children, inventing a story for the boys about visiting their grandma so they wouldn't accidentally say anything to their father. In July of 2085, with a secretly purchased ticket and a small bundle of clothes prepared, I waited for Reggie to leave for one of his meetings that always lasted all night. I took the boys, the bundles, and slipped out in the dead of night, going down the hill as fast as I could. Without making a sound, I arrived at the bus station trembling, in a cold sweat, despite the suffocating July heat. I bought the ticket for 4 the morning, the first bus to my hometown. I sat in a corner with the boys who were sleeping against me, exhausted from the midnight adventure. That's when I saw him enter the bus station, his eyes scanning the place like a predator. The blood in my veins froze. How? How did he find out? I later learned that one of his soldiers saw me going down the hill with the children and found it strange, so he called him. I tried to hide behind a pillar, but it was too late. Our eyes met across the hall. At that moment, I saw my death sentence in his eyes. Reggie crossed the bus station like a bull. He grabbed my arm with such force that it left the marks of his fingers and dragged me outside. The boys crying, people staring, but no one getting involved. Who would mess with a man of that size, with a look on his face like he would kill anyone who came near? "You're going to regret being born," he whispered in my ear as he threw me into the car, and he kept his promise. When we got home, he sent the boys to their room and locked the door from the outside. Their screams still echo in my head to this day. "Mommy, Mommy." And they couldn't do anything, poor things. Neither could I. What happened in that living room, between those walls that don't tell what they see, was the worst beating of my life up to that point. It wasn't a slap. It wasn't a punch. It was a full-on beating from someone who wants to break every bone in your body, who wants to leave you unrecognizable. He used his belt. He used his hand. He used a piece of wood he ripped from the broken table. He only stopped when I couldn't even scream anymore, collapsed in a corner, blood pooling on the concrete floor. "The next time you try to run away," he said, his voice calm now, lighting a cigarette like someone who just finished a routine job, "I won't hit you. I'll break the little legs of those boys one by one. Understood?" I understood. Of course, I understood. And at that moment, lying on that cold floor, the taste of blood in my mouth, something broke inside me. Sometimes, broken hope is the beginning of something else, something stronger than mere expectation. Naomi lost her hope, but did she lose everything? Let's listen on and discover what kind of strength can rise from the ashes of such despair. It wasn't a bone, it was hope. I spent 3 days in bed after that beating. Reggie brought a nurse to take care of me. Actually, she was the lover of another drug dealer who knew how to treat wounds without asking questions. I was lucky that nothing actually broke, just fractured. The pain was so great I thought I was going to die. But a mother's body is stubborn, isn't it? It clings to life even when life doesn't deserve it. The boys were traumatized, poor things. When I finally left the room, they looked at me with a mixture of fear and relief. Michael, the older one, already understood more than he should. Daniel had nightmares, woke up screaming in the middle of the night. And Reggie went back to being the perfect husband for a few weeks. He brought presents, spoke softly, even helped with the children, as if nothing had happened. And life continued in this sick cycle. Good days when he was in a good mood, when business was good. Bad days when someone crossed him on the street, when he lost money, when he drank too much. Me, like a punching bag, the boys growing up, seeing it all, learning to be quiet when their father arrived, not to make noise, to be invisible. In 2089, when I thought my life couldn't get any worse, I found out I was pregnant again. Michael was already 15, Daniel was 12, and there I was, 32 years old looking 50, expecting another child from that man. I cried secretly in the bathroom throughout the pregnancy. It wasn't fair to bring another child into that hell. But what choice did I have? The neighborhood at that time was already in open war. Trafficking had taken over everything. Different factions, disputing every alley, every corner. Reggie had risen in the ranks, as they called it. He was no longer a foot soldier. He had men under him, controlled an area, had respect. The kind of respect that comes from the fear you earn with blood. When I started to feel the labor pains, on a hot January night in 2090, Reggie was at one of his meetings. I called the payphone they used to communicate, but no one answered. I sent Michael to call for help, but that night there was a shootout. No one dared to leave their house. It was there in our room, with only the 2 boys to help me, that Liam was born. Michael, at 15, had to deliver his own brother, following the instructions I gave between contractions. Daniel heating water, bringing towels, crying with fear and worry. And me, I bit on a piece of sheet so as not to scream too loud and wake the neighbors, because even that I was afraid of. What if someone heard and came to help? What if Reggie later thought I had a man in the house? Liam was born perfect, thank God. A strong baby who didn't even cry much, as if he already knew that in that house it was better to stay quiet. When Reggie arrived, 2 days later, he didn't even ask how the birth had been. He looked at the baby, grumbled something like, "Another mouth to feed," and went to sleep. That night, breastfeeding my youngest, looking at the other two boys sleeping on a mat on the floor, I made a decision. I wouldn't try to run away anymore. I had already learned that lesson the hard way. But I also wouldn't live only in fear anymore. Somehow, some way, I was going to turn things around, even if it took years, even if I had to swallow a lot of crap, a lot of humiliation. One day, those 3 boys would have a better life, and so would I. Every cent of his blood money, I vowed, would one day become our salvation. That night in January 2090, with a newborn baby at my breast, 2 sons sleeping on the floor, and a husband who didn't even remember I had given birth alone, I decided I would do anything, absolutely anything, to survive and give my boys a better future, even if it meant getting my own hands dirty. And that's when I started, very slowly, to plan not only my freedom, but my victory. This is the moment a mother turns her pain into a weapon. This is no longer about escape. It's about playing the long game, a chess match where every move must be carefully calculated. Let's see just how Naomi began to play the most important game of her life. The 92nd arrived, and with them the transformation of West Baltimore. What was once a working-class neighborhood where everyone knew each other turned into a war zone. Crack came in with full force, changing even the way trafficking worked. Before it was marijuana, a joint here and there, light stuff. With crack came desperation, violence, the addiction that turned people into zombies overnight, and Reggie changed along with it. From a powder salesman for the rich kids, he rose in the ranks to become the manager of a major spot, with almost 20 men under him. The money increased, the house improved for good. It was no longer a shack, it was a 2-story brick house with aluminum windows, even air conditioning in his room. But along with the money came addiction, not just to the power he already had, but to the very product he sold. It started slowly, a little hit here, another there. He said it was just to test the quality of what he was selling. Then he didn't even bother to hide it. He would come home with glazed eyes, talking nonstop, sweating even with a fan in his face. Crack transformed the monster he already was into an even more unpredictable beast. I remember one day, it must have been 2092 or 2093, he came home at dawn, turned the whole house upside down, looking for money he swore he had left under the mattress. He woke up the children, threw Liam, who was just a baby, from the bed to the floor. When I said he had never left any money there, that he must have spent it on drugs, he grabbed me by the neck, pressed me against the wall, and spat in my face. "Are you robbing me, you cow? Are you taking my money to give to who? To some man you bring here when I'm out?" Michael, now 18 years old, as strong as his father, tried to intervene. He got a pistol whip to the head that left a nasty cut, a scar he has to this day, hidden under his hair. Daniel, 15, hugged his little brother and hid under the bed, trembling. These scenes became more common. The drug-induced paranoia made him see betrayal everywhere. If I took 2 minutes longer to come back from the market, it was because I was with another man. If the food tasted different, it was because I was trying to poison him. If the money he brought home, less and less because he spent almost everything on crack, didn't last the whole week, it was because I was stealing. Once he accused me of putting rat poison in his food, dragged me by the hair to the table, and forced me to eat the whole plate in front of him. "Eat, you miserable bitch. Eat what you poisoned." I ate everything, choking on my tears, the boys watching in horror. In the end, he laughed, that laugh of someone who's not right in the head, and said, "The next time you think about killing me, remember you'll eat the same food I do." But nothing was worse than the humiliations in front of others. Because Reggie liked an audience, he liked to show his soldiers, the other dealers, that he had a completely dominated woman at home. It was his way of proving he was a man, that he had power, as if beating a woman and child was proof of anything other than cowardice. There was one time, at his birthday party at our house, he insisted on these parties with barbecue, drinks, loud music, just to show off what he had. He invited the whole leadership, the other managers, even some bigger bosses. In the middle of the party, after much snorting and drinking, he called me in front of everyone. "Come here, woman." I went, already trembling because I knew that tone. He took a gold bracelet out of his pocket, one of those thick, expensive ones, showed it to everyone. "See this? I was going to give it to my wife as a gift, but I found out she's been talking bad about me to the neighbors." It wasn't true. I barely spoke to the neighbors. I was afraid of my own shadow by then. "Apologize," he ordered, in front of about 20 men armed to the teeth, all laughing, drinking, waiting for the show. "Sorry," I said softly, my eyes on the floor. No, not like that. Kneel and ask properly." My body froze. It was the ultimate humiliation. To kneel in front of all those men, to beg for forgiveness for something I hadn't even done. I hesitated for a second longer than I should have. The slap came with such force that I fell to the floor in a heap. Before I could get up, I felt his foot on my back, pressing me against the floor. I said, "Kneel." I knelt, my face still burning, my eyes full of tears I wouldn't let fall. I looked at him and said what he wanted to hear. "Forgive me, Reggie. I won't talk bad about you anymore. Never again." He smiled, satisfied, and put the bracelet back in his pocket. I never saw that bracelet again. It probably ended up on some lover's arm. He went back to paying attention to his guests, as if nothing had happened. I stayed there on my knees until he made a gesture with his head, indicating I could get up. That night, after everyone had left, Michael came to talk to me. He was a grown man now, 20 years old, working as a bricklayer's assistant downtown. He had a look I'll never forget, a mixture of hatred, shame, and determination. "Mom, we need to get out of this house. I'm saving money. When I have enough, we'll run away. Me, you, Daniel, and Liam." I shook my head sadly. "Your father will find us wherever we go, son. You know that." "Then I'll kill him," he said with a coldness that scared me. "I swear to God, I'll kill him." It was the first time I felt real fear of my own son. Not fear for myself, but fear of what he could become, of what that life was already turning him into. "Don't even joke about that," I replied, holding his face in my hands. "You are better than him. You always will be. Don't get your hands dirty. Don't ruin your life." But deep down, deep down, a part of me wanted someone to do it, for someone to free me from that captivity I called marriage. That night in 2095, it was my youngest son's 5th birthday. I'd scraped together enough to make him a little cake. A simple thing, but it was all we had. And then he came in, his eyes red from crack, that stench of whiskey that always foretold the storm. He took one look at our small celebration, and the rage exploded. It wasn't about the cake being spoiled, as he claimed. It was about control. When my oldest, Michael, tried to stand between us, to protect me, that was it. Reggie pulled the pistol he always carried. I threw myself in front of my son. The butt of the gun came down on my arm, and I heard the snap. The pain was so intense I couldn't even scream. I fell to the floor, my arm hanging at a strange angle, looking like a broken branch. The children were crying. He was laughing, saying that phrase I never forgot, "Job's done." I came back to the present and realized I was squeezing my arm without meaning to, as if the pain were still there. 30 years later, and the bone healed. But there are wounds that not even time can close properly. That night, I continued, my voice firmer now. He left for some settling of accounts in Patapsco Valley State Park. It was a turf war. He left armed to the teeth with his goons. Some of them were found dead 2 days later. Of him, they never even found his flip-flop. The younger girl's eyes widened. It was always like this. The first time they heard the story, they were caught between fear and fascination, and for good reason. In the 92nd, Reggie was one of the most feared drug dealers in the area. He wasn't at the top of the command, but he had his territory, his crew, and a temper so bad that even his partners were afraid of him. "But that's where the real story begins," I said, sitting in the chair I had previously used as a stage. "Because the day my husband disappeared wasn't the end of my misery, it was the beginning of my victory." I took a deep breath, letting the noise of the present fade away. To make them understand the woman I am today, they had to meet the girl I once was. A girl whose life was set on a different course entirely in 1973. It all began when I was a 16-year-old girl, full of dreams and with my head in the clouds. I started. I was born and raised in a rural town in western Maryland, a place that now has a university, but back then it was just dust, livestock, and plantations. I closed my eyes for a second and let the memory return. I could almost see their eyes shining with curiosity. This was the part of the story they liked the most. How a semi-literate woman, with 3 young children, a broken arm, and the widow of a drug dealer, who didn't even have a body to confirm the death, managed to build a meal prep empire that today supplies half the companies in the downtown business district. I knew where he hid the money, I confessed, lowering my voice as if it were still a secret, even after all this time. Inside the saint, a large plaster eagle, one of those really big ones. It was hollowed out inside. He kept money, drugs, sometimes even a small gun. My son shook his head, smiling. He knew this part. He even joked that he was raised on money from a saint, a heresy I pretended not to hear. "And what did you do with the money, Miss Naomi?" asked one of the new girls, one who had come recommended by a friend. Her face was marked by a burn scar, a timid demeanor. She had already told me that her ex-husband had thrown boiling water on her during a fight. I smiled, looking at the restaurant's facade visible through the window. The colorful sign that read, "Naomi's Kitchen since 1996. Below, in smaller letters, "Taste of Freedom." Only those who knew my story understood the double meaning. "I bought an industrial pot," I answered, feeling the pride swell in my chest, as it always did when I reached this part. The biggest pot this neighborhood has ever seen. I started selling lunchboxes at the construction site down the street, where that boutique hotel is today. 10 plates on the first day, 20 on the second. By the end of the month, I had a line of workers waiting for my food every day. I pointed to Brenda, the oldest of all. "This one here was my first employee, Gator's wife. Remember him? Fell from the narrow alley during a chase. Left her with 4 mouths to feed. She came to my door crying, desperate. I put her to work chopping onions the same day." Brenda wiped a tear with the corner of her apron, proud to be part of that story from the beginning. Today she was the manager of the second restaurant, owned her own house, and her 4 children were all educated. I got up again, walking between the tables as I spoke. It was my way of telling a story. I could never stay still. Every woman in this room has her own version of my story. Each one had her Reggie. Some are in prison, others are dead. Some disappeared just like mine. But we all have this in common. We were reborn from the ashes they tried to make of us. I stopped in front of the large window that overlooked the bay. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Down below, the city that the tourists know. Up here, the city that only those who have lived it know what it's like. When you look at me today, you see a successful businesswoman, the owner of Naomi's Kitchen, who has 3 restaurants, contracts with big companies, a lawyer's son. But I want you to always remember, before all this, I was a woman with a broken arm, crying on the kitchen floor, with 3 small children watching. The silence in the room was absolute. Not even the noise of the cars down below seemed to reach us. The difference between staying on the floor and getting up is the same difference between being buried alive and being reborn. And in this neighborhood, my people, we choose to be reborn every day. At that moment, as if rehearsed, my phone rang. It was the manager of the other restaurant, the one near the waterfront, telling me that a large order had arrived for next week. I answered quickly, gave the instructions, and when I hung up, I realized it was time to end the meeting. The girls needed to go back to their homes, their families. "Next week we'll continue this chat," I said, giving the signal that the meeting was over. Because the story of how an uneducated woman turned dirty money into honest food is too long for just one day. They left one by one after hugging me. My son stayed last, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "Mom, to this day, you've never told anyone what really happened to Dad that night, have you?" I met those eyes so much like my own, and smiled faintly. Some truths are like that dense forest. It's better to leave the secrets buried where they are. Some questions don't need an answer, my son. The important thing is that he never came back to break any more of my bones, and that every cent of that dirty money today feeds honest people. My son, the lawyer, he wants facts, and evidence. But some things aren't for a courtroom, honey. Some nights, a woman has to be her own judge, jury, and, well, you get the picture. The forest keeps its secrets, and so do I. I ran my hand through his hair, now a graduated lawyer, and thought about everything that had happened since that night in 1995. The fear, the pain, the hunger, then the struggle, the work, the achievement. An entire life summarized in before and after that man disappeared into the woods. "Come," I said, pulling my son by the hand. "Let's have dinner on the terrace. From there you can see Patapsco Valley State Park. Sometimes I look over there and wonder if he's seeing what I've built with the money he thought was only his." The night had already fallen over the city when we went up to the terrace. The city lights sparkled below, and farther away, the darkness of the forest, where so many secrets lay buried, including, perhaps, the bones of the man who almost destroyed my life but ended up inadvertently giving me the means to rebuild it. The worst day, the day that changed everything, was in May of 2095, a date I never forgot, because it was the day my life split in two, before and after. It was Liam's birthday, 5 years old. I had made a simple cake, one of those box mixes with chocolate frosting on top. It wasn't much, but by the standard of living we had, it was already a party. Reggie didn't like me spending money on nonsense, as he called it. Children's food was nonsense, toys were nonsense, anything that wasn't drugs, alcohol, or gold was nonsense. We sang Happy Birthday, just the family. Me, Michael, Daniel, and the birthday boy. No neighbors, no little friends. You couldn't invite anyone with Reggie the way he was. He wasn't even home. He had gone out to work, which by then meant smoking crack in some corner and shouting orders at the boys from the spot. We were finishing the cake when he arrived. He came in, kicking the door down, his eyes red, sweat dripping, that smell of whiskey mixed with crack smoke that I knew so well. He looked at the table, at the half-eaten cake, at the few decorations I had improvised with colored paper. "What is this?" "It's Liam's birthday," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's 5 today." He looked at the boy as if seeing him for the first time. Liam, poor thing, was already shrinking in his chair, the smile vanishing from his little face. "And who authorized this party with my money? Are we rolling in cash now?" "It was just a little cake, Reggie. Something simple." He approached the table, picked up a piece of cake, put it in his mouth, chewed slowly, staring at me. Then he spat it all on the floor. "This is shit. It's sour. Did you give my son spoiled cake?" It wasn't spoiled. I had just made it that afternoon, but contradicting Reggie was asking for a beating. "It must have been the milk," I murmured. "I bought it yesterday. I thought it was good." "Are you stupid or what? You don't even know how to check if milk is spoiled. Are you trying to kill the kid?" It all happened very quickly after that. He flipped the table, knocking over the rest of the cake, the plates, everything on the floor. Liam started to cry. Daniel tried to take his little brother out of the kitchen. Michael stood up, tried to get between me and Reggie. "Dad, leave Mom alone. It wasn't her fault. That only made everything worse." Reggie hated being contradicted, especially by his eldest son, who was already his size and no longer bowed his head as he used to. "Are you defending her? Are you defending this bitch who almost killed your brother with spoiled food?" Michael stood firm. "No one is sick. The cake was good. It was like lighting the fuse of a bomb." Reggie pulled the gun he always carried at his waist and pointed it at his own son. "Repeat that, boy. Repeat that I'm lying." I threw myself in front of Michael. "For God's sake, Reggie, he's our son." The butt of the gun hit my right arm, right where the bone is thinnest, near the wrist. I heard the crack even before I felt the pain, that horrible sound of breaking bone. I fell to the floor, my arm hanging at a strange angle, the pain so strong I could barely breathe. "Job's done," he said, putting the gun away. "Now see if you learn not to contradict me." The boys carried me to the room after he left. Michael wanted to take me to the hospital, but I knew I couldn't. Reggie had contacts in all the hospitals in the region. They would notify him and the next beating would be worse. Besides, how to explain it? I fell down the stairs no longer worked. I had used that excuse too many times. Daniel remembered Mrs. Miller, an old lady who lived 3 alleys down and who had been a nurse before retiring. She treated gunshot victims, stabbing victims, every kind of emergency that appeared in the neighborhood and couldn't go to the hospital for obvious reasons. We waited for Reggie to leave again, and the boys took me there at night, wrapped in a sheet to disguise it. Mrs. Miller didn't ask questions, just looked at my arm, shook her head, and said, "I'm going to have to pull it to set the bone. It's going to hurt." It hurt. It hurt so much I fainted. When I woke up, my arm was immobilized with improvised wooden splints and bandages. It wasn't perfect. To this day, this arm hurts when it's about to rain and I can't bend it properly. But it was the best that could be done under the circumstances. "Your husband can't know you came here," Mrs. Miller warned. "If he asks, say you took care of it yourself at home." I nodded, the tears I'd held back finally blurring her kind, wrinkled face. In a world ruled by Reggie's cruelty, Mrs. Miller's quiet courage was a miracle. She asked for nothing in return. She didn't preach or judge. She simply saw a woman in pain and offered her healing hands. That small act of humanity, in that dimly lit back room, was the first flicker of light I had seen in years. It reminded me that the world was bigger than Reggie's fists, that goodness still existed, hiding in the shadows, waiting for a chance to emerge. It was a seed of hope planted in the barren soil of my despair. I nodded gratefully. Everyone in the neighborhood knew what Reggie was like. No one dared to help openly. But in those moments, I discovered that there was a silent support network. Women like Mrs. Miller, who treated wounds without asking questions. Neighbors who pretended not to hear the screams but left food at the door when he left me without money for the market. It was at Mrs. Miller's house, waiting for the bandages to dry, that I heard the boys whispering in the other room. I strained my ears. "I know where he keeps it," Michael was saying. "It's too risky," Daniel replied. "It's riskier to keep on like this. Look what he did to Mom. Next time he could kill her or one of us." I pretended not to hear anything when they came back, but that conversation kept hammering in my head. Right there, listening to my boys whisper about stealing from their own father, something inside me shifted. It wasn't about running anymore. A mother can endure anything for herself, but when the poison starts to seep into her children, you don't run from the snake. You find a way to cut off its head. That's a mother's heart. It can endure any cruelty for itself, but it becomes fierce when its children are in danger. From this moment on, Naomi is no longer a submissive wife. Let's find out just how she plans to cut off the snake's head. In the following days, with a broken arm and covered in bruises, I barely left the bed. Reggie would only come home to sleep. Sometimes not even that. Michael took the reins of the house. He was already working, earning a little money that barely helped with expenses. Daniel took care of Liam, cooked, cleaned what he could. It was a sad sight to see those boys playing the role of adults so early. One night, after the children were asleep, Michael came to talk to me in the room. "Mom, I need to show you something." He took me to the living room, where there was a large ceramic eagle statue, almost the size of a child. Reggie was a devotee. He said the eagle protected him in his wars. The irony of a violent drug dealer being religious never escaped me. "Look," Michael whispered, turning the statue. At the base, there was an opening disguised by the paint. He put his hand in and pulled out a wad of money. This is where he keeps most of it. There's more hidden around the neighborhood at the sales points, but the bulk is here. I froze from head to toe. "How did you find this out?" "I saw him messing with it once when he thought I was asleep." "Michael, for the love of God, put that back. If your father finds out, he won't find out. He doesn't even count it right, Mom. He's always high. If we take a little at a time, he won't even notice." I looked at my eldest son and saw in his eyes a hardness that a 1-year-old boy shouldn't have. But I also saw determination and love. He wanted to save us in any way he could. "No," I said firmly. "I won't let you steal from your father. It's too dangerous." "It's not stealing," he replied, putting the money back in the hiding place. "It's survival." I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, my broken arm throbbing with a pain that felt like a reminder. But for the first time, the thoughts in my head were not of escape, but of justice. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. He had built his kingdom on our fear and pain. He had hidden his treasure inside a false idol. And I, the ghost in his house, would be the one to dismantle it all. The money inside that eagle wasn't just cash. It was years of our suffering, crystallized. It was my children's stolen laughter and my stolen dreams. It was our salvation. The temptation was no longer just to run. It was to take back what was ours and use his own filthy wealth to build a future he could never touch. A week later, when I could already get up and do a few things around the house, I went to clean the living room. Reggie wasn't there. He hadn't shown up for 3 days, a common thing when he went on one of his crack binges. I stopped in front of the eagle, looking at those plaster eyes that seemed to judge me. "Forgive me, Saint," I murmured, before turning the statue and opening the secret compartment. Inside, besides several wads of money, there was a small revolver and some packets of what I imagined was cocaine. I took only 1 wad of money, the smallest one, and closed everything up again, positioning the eagle exactly as it was before. But where to hide it? It couldn't be inside the house. Reggie turned everything upside down during his paranoid fits. It had to be a place he would never think to check. That's when I remembered Mrs. Davis, the neighbor from the back alley. She was a blind, widowed old lady who lived alone in a small, tidy house. Every now and then, I would bring her a plate of food, wash some clothes for her. She always said, "Anything I can do for you, Naomi, just ask." The next day, with the excuse of bringing her some beans I had cooked, I went to her house. I explained my situation, not the whole truth, but enough that I needed to hide some money from my husband for an emergency, for the boys. "You can keep it here, my child," she said without hesitation. "He will never think of looking in the house of a blind old woman." Thus began our scheme. Every week, I would take a small amount from the eagle's hiding place. Never the same amount, never on the same day of the week, and I would take it to Mrs. Davis. She kept it in an empty powdered milk can, which we later buried in her backyard, under a basil plant. That money was my light at the end of the tunnel. It grew slowly, but it grew. I did the math in my head. How much would it cost to rent a house far away from there? How much would I need to support myself and the boys until I could find work? How much to start a new life where no one knew us? The older boys knew about the plan. Michael even contributed part of what he earned as a bricklayer's assistant. Daniel kept watch, warned when their father was coming back. Only Liam, at 5, was left out. A small child can't keep a secret. It was a family conspiracy against their own patriarch. Bizarre, isn't it? But it was either that or continue to be massacred. June of 2095 was a tense month in the neighborhood. A major police operation had resulted in the seizure of a huge drug shipment that was to be distributed in the area. The loss was great for everyone involved, including Reggie. He was furious, more violent than ever. He would spend days without coming home, and when he did, it was only to vent his anger on whoever was in front of him. "You're bad luck, woman," he would shout, breaking things around the house. "Since you appeared in my life, everything goes wrong. You are bad luck personified." I endured it in silence. I knew that soon the hidden money would be enough. I just needed to hold on a little longer, just a little longer. In July, the tension in the neighborhood worsened. It wasn't just the police. There were rumors that a rival faction was planning to take over the territory. Armed men began to circulate more openly. Watch posts were reinforced. The entire West Baltimore was on high alert. On the 15th of July, I'll never forget that date, Reggie came home in a state I had never seen before. He wasn't just high or drunk, he was possessed by something I can only describe as pure fury. His eyes glazed over, his mouth foaming, his hands trembling so much he could barely hold his cigarette. Those sons of bitches from East Baltimore are trying to invade. They think they can take what's mine. I tried to calm him down. I offered food, coffee, anything to distract him from that state. I don't want any damn food. I want respect. I'm going to show them who's boss here tonight. He opened the eagle, took the revolver, more money, put it all in his pockets, and called some of his soldiers on the radio. Within half an hour, the living room was full of armed men, all agitated, talking about breaking things, sweeping the area, leaving a message. I understood what was happening. They were going to invade the rival territory. It was a suicide mission. They were few against many, but the drugs and wounded pride wouldn't let Reggie think straight. "Stay with the kids," he ordered as he was leaving. "When I get back, I want hot food on the table and a bottle of whiskey to celebrate." At the door, he hesitated for a moment. He turned, looked at me in a strange way. It was a look I had never seen in him before. It wasn't anger or contempt. It was almost fear. "If I don't come back," he said, lowering his voice so only I could hear, "there's more money hidden in the mattress in our room, under the lining. Take it and disappear with the boys." I was paralyzed. It was the first time in all those years that he had shown any concern for our well-being if something happened to him. For a second, just a second, I saw a glimpse of the young man I fell in love with at that party so many years ago. "Are you sure you have to go?" I ventured to ask, my voice almost a whisper. He had already gone back to being the usual Reggie, tough, cold, violent. "Are you doubting me, woman? Do you think I'm a coward?" "No, of course not. It's just, I'll be back when I'm back. And woe to you if you're not here waiting." One final threat before he ran into the darkness. Will Reggie return to make Naomi wait, just as he ordered? Or will that forest forever bury the secrets of this fateful night? Let's stay with Naomi and her children as they endure the longest night of their lives. He left, slamming the door, the other men behind him, like a pack following its leader. From the window, I saw them going down the alley, guns in hand, determination in their steps. They were going to Patapsco Valley State Park, the dense forest that separates some neighborhoods, to use the darkness as cover for the attack. I called the boys who were hiding in their room since their father arrived. I explained that he had left with his men, that there could be a shootout, that we needed to stay alert. "If you start hearing gunshots, everyone to the bathroom, lie down in the tub. Understood?" I instructed, as I had done so many times before. We spent the night awake, waiting. Liam slept in my lap, exhausted from so much fear. Michael stayed at the window, watching. Daniel made strong coffee to keep us awake. With every noise outside, my heart raced. Around 3 the morning, we heard the first shots, still distant, coming from the direction of the park. Then more shots, closer, screams, sirens in the distance. "To the bathroom," I ordered, picking up Liam. We huddled there in the bathtub, the four of us together, like so many other nights of police operations or confrontations. The shootout lasted almost an hour. Then it subsided until it stopped completely. Total silence. That heavy silence that always comes after the storm. We stayed there for another hour, afraid to come out. When we finally did, the sun was already starting to rise. From the window, we saw movement at the entrance of the neighborhood. Police cars, an ambulance, men being taken away, some on stretchers, others handcuffed. "Stay here," I told the boys. "I'm going downstairs to see what happened." I went down the hill with my heart in my hand. Other women were doing the same, all with the same fear in their eyes. The fear of recognizing a husband, a son, a brother among the dead or arrested. At the bottom of the hill, a policeman blocked the women's passage, giving only minimal information. There was a confrontation in Patapsco Valley State Park. Some criminals were killed, others arrested. The bodies are being taken to the coroner's office. "What are their names? Who died?" the desperate women asked. "We don't have full identification yet. 3 bodies have been found so far, all from the rival faction. Some managed to escape through the forest." I felt a momentary relief. If the dead were from the rival faction, Reggie wasn't among them. But where was he then? Arrested? On the run? I went back home and spent the whole day waiting, with no news. At night, some of the soldiers who had stayed in the neighborhood came to ask if I knew anything. No one had seen Reggie since they entered the forest. Some said he had been shot, others that he had managed to escape through a path only he knew. One day turned into 2, 2 turned into a week. Nothing. No sign of Reggie. not among the arrested, not among the identified dead. It was as if the forest had swallowed him. After 2 weeks, one of his trusted men, the one who was like his right-hand man, came to the house. He was nervous, looking over his shoulder the whole time. "Miss Naomi, do you know where the boss might have gone? If he had any hiding place, any place to escape to?" "I don't know anything," I answered, and it was true. He never told me those things. He didn't seem convinced. He entered the house, started messing with things, opening cabinets. He must have left money somewhere. Instructions on what to do if he disappeared. I understood what was happening. With Reggie missing, his men were worried about control of the territory and the money. If he didn't show up soon, others would take his place. It was the law of the neighborhood. "There's nothing here," I said firmly. He never trusted me with that kind of thing. He stayed a while longer, rummaging through the house, but eventually left, frustrated. Before leaving, he gave me a strange look. "If you know anything, you'd better talk for your own good." I closed the door and slid to the floor, exhausted. The boys came running, worried. "Mom, what do we do?" Michael asked. I looked at my 3 sons, the oldest already a man, the middle one becoming a young man, the youngest still so small, and I knew exactly what we needed to do. "We wait," I answered. "We wait a little longer to see if he shows up. If he doesn't, we start a new life." Because that night, when Reggie entered Patapsco Valley State Park to settle a score, was the last time anyone saw him alive. And what happened next, how I turned dirty drug money into honest food that feeds families, is a story that many people in the neighborhood know, but no one has the courage to tell. 3 bodies were found in the forest, all identified. None of them were Reggie's. But the forest is large and hides many secrets. So much so that to this day, 30 years later, there are people who swear they see his soul wandering among the trees on a full moon night. Did he escape? Is he still alive today, hiding somewhere, afraid to come back? Or did he turn into fertilizer in that dense forest where so many bodies have been buried over the years of the drug war? This I have never told anyone, not even my children. Some questions are better left unanswered, but 2 more bodies were found in Patapsco Valley State Park in the following days. This time they were from our side, Bullet and Mac, 2 of the men who had left with Reggie that night. The news trickled into the neighborhood, brought by police officers who demanded money for information, by relatives who worked at the coroner's office, by rumors that spread faster than rainwater on a slope. The bodies were disfigured, they said, shot first, then mutilated to send a message. A product of the drug war, pure revenge. A week passed, then 2, and still no sign of Reggie, neither alive nor dead. The whole neighborhood buzzed with the wildest theories, that he had fled with the crew's money, that he had been kidnapped by the rival faction, that he was hiding at a lover's house, that he had been arrested by the feds, and no one knew. And me? I lived each day as if walking on eggshells. In the morning, I'd wake up expecting him to walk through the door at any moment, furious about something, ready to take it out on me and the kids, as he always did. At night, I'd go to sleep, looking at the window, afraid of seeing his shadow approaching in the dark. Liam, poor thing, had nightmares almost every night. He would wake up screaming for his father, not out of longing, but out of terror. About 10 days after the disappearance, I received the visit I had been expecting. Reggie's right-hand man appeared at the house with 2 other thugs. They didn't enter violently. This time they knocked on the door like civilized people. They even took off their hats when they entered the living room, but their eyes were hard, calculating. "Miss Naomi," he began, feigning politeness. "Sorry to bother you, but the situation is complicated. It's been almost 2 weeks since the boss disappeared, and we need to make decisions." "What kind of decisions?" I asked, keeping my voice firm, despite my racing heart. "Business, ma'am. The crew can't stop. There are suppliers to pay, soldiers waiting for their salaries, police wanting bribes. I understood where he was going. With Reggie gone, someone needed to take control. And that someone would be him, of course, but he needed the money, and most importantly, he needed to know if Reggie had left any instructions with me. "I don't know anything about his business," I replied, crossing my arms. "He never talked about these things with me. He exchanged glances with the other two. One of them, whom they called Toothy because he was missing a front tooth, took a step forward. "With all due respect, ma'am, we know the boss always kept money here at home. A part of the crew's funds, you see, and that money belongs to the crew. It's not personal money." I maintained a neutral expression, although inside I was panicking. Did they know about the hiding place in the Eagle? About the money in the mattress that Reggie had mentioned before leaving? "I don't know about any money. If he kept it, he took the secret with him." He didn't seem convinced. He motioned with his head, and the other two began to search the house, opening cabinets, drawers, lifting mattresses. Michael, who was listening to everything from his room, came out furious. "What is this? You can't just come in and ransack our house." He was 21, the same height as his father, and had a courage that made me as proud as it made me scared. The right-hand man put his hand on his waist, where he surely carried a gun. "Stay out of it, kid. This is men's business. My father is missing, not dead," Michael retorted. "Until he shows up, nobody touches his things." It was a tense moment. I thought they were going to shoot my son right there in front of me. But something in Michael's manner, perhaps the resemblance to his father, that same posture of someone who doesn't back down, made the man retreat. "All right, kid. We respect your pain. But if you find out anything, you'd better let us know. The crew doesn't like to be double-crossed. They left without finding anything." The Eagle remained intact in the living room. They didn't even think to check it. They found the money in the mattress, but since it was a small amount compared to what Reggie used to handle, they thought it was just a household reserve. When they left, I hugged Michael tightly. "Don't you ever do that again, son. They could have killed you." "I won't let anyone disrespect you, Mom. Not them, not anyone." That night, after the children were asleep, I went to the Eagle, opened the secret compartment, and took out all the money that was there. A large sum, the most I had ever seen together in my life. Together with what I had already saved in the milk can at Mrs. Davis's house, it was enough to start over somewhere else. But where to go? Reggie had contacts all over the state. If he were alive and found me, he would kill me for the betrayal. If he were dead and the crew found out I took the money, the end would be the same. I had no relatives who could take me in. Reggie had made sure to cut all ties with my family over the years. I spent the whole night awake, thinking, and when the sun rose, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to run. I was going to stay and turn that dirty money into something clean. Something that could give my children a future. A decision as risky as it was extraordinary. Naomi chose to stand and fight instead of run, to turn the very weapon that destroyed her into the foundation for a new life. The journey to build the Naomi's Kitchen empire officially begins now, and it won't be an easy one. Run? Run where? I'd seen it 100 times. A woman runs and the monster's legs are always longer. Number? The only way to be truly free wasn't to run from his ghost, but to stand on the ashes of his kingdom and build something he could never touch. That's real power. The weeks passed and turned into months. August, September, October. Still no Reggie. The rumors continued that he had been seen in Bel Air, that he had fled to Canada, that he was living with a woman in Philadelphia. But nothing concrete. No one from the crew had officially taken his place, which was strange. It seemed they were waiting for confirmation of his death before making the replacement. Or maybe they were afraid. Reggie had many enemies, but also powerful allies. In the community, things remained tense. More frequent police raids, disputes between factions, a feeling that something big was about to happen. Michael insisted that we should use the money to get out of there for good. "Mom, we could go to the Midwest and start over there. No one would find us." But I felt that running away would be admitting guilt. And more than that, it would be abandoning the only thing I knew as a home, however dysfunctional it was. "No, son, we're going to stay and do things differently. It will be right here that I'll show the world that Reggie's wife is not just Reggie's wife." In November of 2095, 4 months after his disappearance, I made my first move. I went to the lower part of West Baltimore, where Mr. Henderson's warehouse was, a gentleman who sold construction materials. He knew me by sight, knew who I was, or rather, whose wife I was. "Mr. Henderson, I want to rent a piece of your warehouse," He looked at me suspiciously. For what, ma'am? I'm going to start a meal prep business. To sell plates at the construction site down there. He scratched his head thoughtfully. He knew about Reggie's disappearance, like everyone else, and must have been wondering if I had permission from the crew to open a business. It's complicated, ma'am. You have to have permission for commerce here in the neighborhood. I understood what he was saying between the lines. Any business in the neighborhood paid protection money to the traffickers. That's how it worked. I'll handle that, I said firmly. How much for the rent? We closed the deal right there. With money from the Eagle, I bought basic equipment. A 4-burner industrial stove, large pots, aluminum containers, utensils. Michael and some of his friends helped build a simple counter, a sink, all very basic. Daniel, who had a knack for drawing, made a sign, Naomi's Kitchen, home-style cooking. On the first day, I made 30 plates, rice, beans, ground beef, and salad. Simple, but well made. Michael and Daniel took turns selling them at the entrance of the nearby construction site, where a new building was going up. They came back an hour later, with all the plates sold and orders for the next day. Mom, the guys loved it. They said it's much better than the food from the truck that comes by. It was as if a flame had been lit inside me, one that had been extinguished for many years. I was good at something. I could create, produce, be more than a punching bag. The next day, I made 40 plates, then 50. Within a week, I was making 100 a day and still couldn't keep up with the demand. I hired 2 helpers, women from the community who, like me, had difficult stories and needed work. We expanded the menu, started serving not only the construction site, but also small offices in the area, and even some houses that requested delivery. The boys took turns with the deliveries after school. Even Liam, still small, helped by packing disposable cutlery and napkins. The money started coming in clean, honest, hard-earned. Of course, it was nowhere near what Reggie earned from trafficking, but it was ours. And more importantly, no one got beaten to earn it. But not everything was a bed of roses, of course. One day, I was alone in the warehouse preparing the next day's food when the door opened. It was a man I had never seen, in a suit despite the heat, with that look that only a city detective has, Naomi Grace Washington. I froze to my soul. It was the first time in months that someone had called me by my full name. Yes, that's me. He came in, looking around with curiosity. He took a badge out of his pocket. Detective Robert Miles. I'm investigating the disappearance of your husband, Reginald Washington. I feigned surprise. After all this time, I thought no one from the police cared. The police always care, Miss Naomi, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, especially when it comes to prominent figures like your husband. I continued stirring the pot of beans, as if his visit hadn't pulled the ground from under my feet. I don't know how I can help. I've already told you everything I knew when he disappeared. That's an interesting business you've set up here, he commented, ignoring my response. It started right after he disappeared, didn't it? I understood immediately where he was going. I wasn't stupid. Yes, I needed to support my children, since I was left alone. Of course. It's admirable. I just wonder. He picked up a spoon, tasted the beans straight from the pot. Wow, this is delicious. I just wonder where you got the capital to start. Opening a business, even a small one, costs money. I kept my gaze firm, even feeling the cold sweat run down my back. Savings and help from neighbors. He laughed, a humorless laugh. Miss Naomi, we both know your husband wasn't a man who would leave savings lying around unless... He kept looking at me, waiting for me to complete the sentence, to fall into the trap. I didn't fall, unless he trusted his wife very much. He completed himself, which, from what I know of Reggie, wasn't the case. I dropped the wooden spoon, facing him directly. What do you want, detective? If you've come to accuse me of something, say it now. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not accusing anyone, just doing my job, investigating a disappearance. We were silent for a few seconds, sizing each other up. You know, Miss Naomi, I've always admired entrepreneurial people who take lemons and make lemonade, who know how to reuse resources. He took a card from his pocket, placed it on the counter. "If you remember anything about your husband, give me a call. And if you need any guidance on business licenses, permits, those bureaucratic things, I'm also at your disposal." I understood the message between the lines. He knew, or strongly suspected, that I had used drug money to open the business, but instead of arresting me, he was offering protection in exchange for a share of the profits. That's how it worked in the city. Even the police wanted their slice of the pie. "I'll remember that, detective. Thank you for the visit." When he left, I had to sit down, my legs trembling so much they could barely support me. It was a new kind of danger, one I hadn't foreseen, but also, in a way, a validation. My small business was already attracting attention. It was already big enough for the police to want a bite. The following week, I sent Michael to deliver a special lunchbox to the address on the detective's card. Along with it, an envelope with money. Not much, but enough to show goodwill. It was the price of peace, I knew, the first of many payments I would make over the years to keep my business running without interference. In early 1996, Naomi's Kitchen was already a well-known name in the region. We had expanded to a larger space, still in the same warehouse, but now occupying almost half of it. In addition to the meals for workers and offices, we started supplying for small events, birthday parties, meetings. Daniel, who had a knack for numbers, handled the accounts. Michael coordinated deliveries and the purchase of supplies. It was a legitimate family business, but we lived in a delicate balance. On one hand, I paid the fees to the crew, now led by a cousin of Reggie's, who had taken over after a 6-month impasse. On the other hand, I kept Detective Miles informed about the progress of the business with regular contributions. And in the midst of it all, I tried to maintain the facade of a hard-working widow, supporting her children with the sweat of her own brow. The truth is that the money from the Eagle, which no one ever found out I took, had been fundamental. Without it, I would never have been able to take the first steps. But now the business was standing on its own 2 feet, generating enough profit to reinvest and even save a little. It was in mid-2096 that the first major challenge came. A group of drug dealers from East Baltimore, the same one that had clashed with Reggie on that fateful night, showed up at the warehouse. There were 5 armed men led by a guy they called Juice. "So this is where Reggie's wife hides," said Juice, looking around with contempt, "selling plates while her husband rots in the forest." I froze. Did they know something I didn't? Was Reggie really dead, confirmed? "My husband disappeared," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what happened to him." Juice laughed, a laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "Of course you don't know, and I'm a priest." The others laughed too, a laugh that had a threat behind it. He came closer, getting so close I could smell the cigarette smoke on his breath. "Now listen up, lady. West Baltimore is changing hands. Soon it will be our territory, and when that happens, all businesses will pay a fee to us, understand?" "I already pay the crew," I replied, feeling a courage I didn't know I had. "I'm not paying twice." "You'll pay who we tell you to pay," he growled, grabbing my arm, the very one that had been broken and still ached when the weather changed. "Or else you'll close, one way or another." At that moment, the back door opened, and Michael came in, carrying boxes of tomatoes. Seeing the scene, the armed men, one of them holding his mother's arm, he dropped the boxes and charged forward without a second thought. "Let her go, you bastard." It was chaos. The men drew their guns, pointing them at Michael. Juice let me go, turning to face my son. I thought that was the end, that they would kill him in front of me, then kill me, and everything I had built would go down the drain. But then something unexpected happened. Michael, instead of attacking, stopped a few steps away and spoke, his voice surprisingly calm. "You don't want to do this. It's not good for anyone." "Who are you to tell us what's good for us, kid?" Juice replied, the gun still pointed. "I'm Reggie's son, and I know things you'd like to know." That got their attention. Juice lowered his gun a little, intrigued. "What kind of things?" "Where the weapons my father hid are, where the supplier's contacts are, and where the part of the money you think disappeared with him is." I was in shock. What was Michael talking about? Did he know things I didn't? "And why would you tell us this?" Juice asked suspiciously. "Because I want to make a deal." You leave our business alone, without paying any fees. And in return, besides the information, we'll provide free plates for your men every day. It was a bold, almost absurd proposal. To feed the men of a rival faction for free in exchange for protection, but it was also brilliant. Food was a valuable asset in the neighborhood, especially for soldiers who spent days at their posts without being able to leave to eat properly. Juice thought for a moment, looking from Michael to me, evaluating the proposal. And how do I know it's not a trap, that you won't poison the food? Michael took a step forward without fear. Because I'm not stupid. If one of you gets sick, we all die. It's a mutually beneficial agreement. You get good food, we get protection. There was a long pause, tense as a guitar string about to break. Finally, Juice holstered his gun and extended his hand. Deal. But if you try any funny business? I won't, Michael assured, shaking his hand. Man's word. Naomi's eldest son has truly become a man. He doesn't use guns, but his mind and his courage to protect his family, a lesson his brutish father could never understand. How long can this lie keep them safe? Let's keep listening to find out. After they left, I grabbed my son by the shoulders in a panic. Are you crazy? What's this story about information, about hidden weapons? You don't know any of that. He smiled, a smile that mixed pride and sadness. I don't really know, Mom. I made it all up. But they don't have to know. And by the time they find out you lied, they won't find out anytime soon. And by then, we'll have expanded enough not to need them anymore. It's just buying time. I looked at my boy, and for a second, I saw his father's nerve. But there was no cruelty in his eyes, only a desperate kind of cleverness. Was I proud? Lord, I was terrified. But in this life, honey, sometimes a well-told lie is the only shield you've got. I looked at my son, my boy, who was no longer a boy, and I saw there a shrewdness, a capacity to negotiate under pressure that even I didn't know he had. In a way, he had inherited his father's survival instinct, but without the cruelty. Where did you learn to do that? He shrugged. You learn a lot living in a place like this. That night, after everyone was asleep, I cried alone in the kitchen, out of fear, pride, and relief. My son had saved us with a well-told lie. It was probably wrong to feel proud of that, but I felt it anyway. The next day, we started delivering the promised meals. 10 a day at the beginning, taken by Daniel to a neutral point where Juice's men would pick them up. Over time, we increased to 15, 20. It was a cost, of course, but much less than the fees we would have had to pay, and we were buying something more valuable than money: security. The months went by, the business grew. Soon, Mr. Henderson's warehouse became too small. We needed our own space, bigger, better located. That's when the opportunity arose, a small commercial property for sale in the lower part of West Baltimore, near the main avenue. It was an old bakery that had closed, with the entire structure ready: industrial oven, counters, storage. It was expensive, more than I could afford with the business's cash flow. But I still had a reserve of the money from the Eagle saved for an emergency, and this seemed like enough of an emergency, the chance to have our own space, legitimately mine, where I could expand without depending on anyone's goodwill. In 1998, 3 years after Reggie's disappearance, I opened the first Naomi's Kitchen restaurant. It was no longer just delivery. Now we also served on site, with simple but clean tables, homemade food at a fair price. Michael, who had taken a business administration course at the community college, handled the management. Daniel, now 18, supervised the kitchen with me, and Liam, at 8, helped at the cash register after school, already learning to do math in his head better than many adults. It was also around this time that I started hiring more women, specifically women who were in situations similar to the one I had lived through, wives of imprisoned or dead drug dealers, often left with children and debts, without prospects, without support. The first was Brenda, the widow of Gator, who had fallen from the narrow alley during a police chase. Then came Maria, Sandra, Josepha, each with her own story of pain, each desperately needing a chance. It wasn't charity, it was solidarity. I knew what they were going through because I had been through the same thing. And I also knew that with one opportunity, just one, They could transform their lives as I had transformed mine. The news spread. Soon, there was a line of women wanting to work for me. I had to start selecting, giving priority to those with young children, those who had no other source of income. Most had no experience in a professional kitchen, but I could teach that. What you can't teach is the will to change your life. And all of them had that in spades. In 1999, 4 years after Reggie's disappearance, we already had the restaurant running at full steam and the meal service, catering to construction sites, offices, and events throughout the southern part of the city. I bought an old van for deliveries, then a second one. We hired 2 drivers, former valets who knew every street and shortcut in the city. Reggie. No one talked about him anymore. It was as if he had never existed. From time to time, rumors would surface that he had been seen in Chicago, that he was imprisoned in Mexico, that he had died of an overdose somewhere, but nothing concrete. No body ever appeared. No proof of life ever appeared. The forest had swallowed him, it seemed. Detective Miles still showed up from time to time, always with that same smile that didn't reach his eyes, always taking his envelope. Juice's men continued to receive their daily meals, although the valuable information promised by Michael never materialized. He always came up with an excuse, a postponement, and they, busy with the drug war, ended up forgetting to press the issue. One particularly busy day at the restaurant, a customer called me aside after paying her bill. She was an elegant, gray-haired lady I had never seen before. "You are Miss Naomi, aren't you?" "The owner of Naomi's Kitchen," I confirmed with a nod, intrigued. She smiled, a sincere smile, unlike Detective Miles. "My husband works at City Hall, in the business licensing department. He mentioned that your establishment is one of the few in the region that has all its documentation in order, all taxes paid. It's rare to see that, especially," she hesitated, searching for the right words, especially in businesses that started, let's say, unconventionally. I froze inside but kept the smile on my face. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." "I started with my savings after my husband disappeared." She nodded sympathetically. Of course. What matters is that now it's a legitimate business that employs people, that pays taxes. The city needs more entrepreneurs like you." She placed a card in my hand. "If you need any guidance on expansion, on new licenses, contact me. It would be a pleasure to help a woman who has done so much with so little." When she left, I stood looking at the card thoughtfully. It was from the Municipal Secretariat of Economic Development. A valuable contact, no doubt, but also a reminder that my past, or rather, Reggie's past, would never be completely buried. There would always be someone who knew or suspected or had heard rumors. The difference now was that I was no longer afraid of those rumors. I had built something solid, something real. The dirty money had turned into honest food, which fed families, which generated jobs, which paid taxes. That's what mattered. The money was dirty, yes, but if it was going to sit there inside a plaster eagle, or if it was going to be used by other traffickers to buy more guns, more drugs, more death, why not turn it into something that generates life? That's what I did. And if I could go back, I would do it all the same. Because on that July night in 2095, when Reggie went into the forest and never came out, it wasn't just his fate that changed. It was mine too, and my children's, and that of all the women who work with me today, who have a decent salary, who can support their families without depending on any man. In the end, maybe it was the best thing Reggie ever did for us. Disappear. 30 years have passed since that night Reggie walked into Patapsco Valley State Park and never came back. 30 years of struggle, of work, of rebuilding. Today, in 2025, when I look out the window of my office on the 3rd floor of the Naomi's Kitchen building, I can hardly believe the transformation not just of my life, but of the entire business that was born from the desperation of a broken woman. We have 3 restaurants now. The first one, at the entrance of West Baltimore, is still running, though it's very different from the renovated bakery we opened in 2098. It's been completely modernized, with air conditioning, a digital menu, even a small area for live music on weekends. The second one is in Harbor East, a dream that seemed impossible for a woman from the projects like me. A restaurant in a noble neighborhood, frequented even by celebrities who take pictures with the businesswoman who came from the community. The third, our most recent, we opened in Fells Point 2 years ago, but the heart of the business is still the meal preps. They're no longer aluminum containers. Now they are sustainable packaging, a varied menu, vegetarian options, all very professional. We supply large companies, events, hospitals. We have a complete industrial kitchen with modern equipment that Daniel, my middle son, designed especially to optimize production. Michael, my eldest, finished college with a degree in business administration and is now the CEO of the company. He was the one who transformed a backyard business into a real company, with a business plan, growth strategy, all that modern language that I confess sometimes makes my head spin. He's 51 now, married, with 2 grown children. He's a fulfilled, respected man, nothing like his father except for his physical appearance. Daniel went into engineering. He always had a knack for machines, for fixing things. When we were still operating in Mr. Henderson's warehouse, he was the one who kept the equipment running, improvising parts when we didn't have money to buy new ones. Today, at 48, besides designing our kitchens, he has a small consulting firm for restaurant equipment. He married one of our former employees, Denise, who started by washing dishes and is now a trained nutritionist. And Liam, my youngest, the baby who was born alone at home because his father was too busy trafficking, became a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. He graduated with honors, passed the bar exam on his first try, and got a postgraduate degree in business law. At 35, he handles all the legal aspects of the company, the contracts, the licenses. He was the one who legally structured our system of prioritizing the hiring of women in vulnerable situations, ensuring it was within the law. My boys, sometimes, when the 3 of them are together in the same room, talking about business, I just watch from a distance, my heart nearly bursting with pride. I think about how they could have ended up, like so many other children of drug dealers who follow the same path as their parents, entering a life of crime early. If Reggie had been present in their upbringing, that would probably have been their fate. But his disappearance, which at the time seemed like a tragedy, was actually a liberation. Today we have over 100 employees, and I say female employees because 90% are women. It's our hiring policy. Priority for female heads of household, especially those in vulnerable situations, victims of domestic violence, widowed or abandoned, single mothers. It's not just out of solidarity, although that counts too. It's because I know from my own experience that there is no worker more dedicated, more determined, than a woman fighting to raise her children. Brenda, my first employee back in the 92nd, is retired now, but she still shows up from time to time for a coffee and to tell the newcomers how it all started with an industrial pot and a lot of courage. Her 4 children all graduated. One is a doctor, another an engineer, one a teacher, another a business administrator. None of them entered a life of crime. None repeated the cycle of violence that their father perpetuated. These are the stories I'm most proud of. Our selection process is different from that of regular companies. We don't care so much about previous experience or education. We can teach that. What we look for is attitude, the will to change one's life. And when we hire, it's not just a job we offer, it's a complete transformation program. In addition to the work itself, all new employees undergo financial literacy training. They learn to manage their own money, to save, to invest, even if it's just a little. We also offer opportunities to complete their education. Many dropped out of school early, either due to teenage pregnancy or pressure from controlling husbands. We have partnerships with GED programs, technical courses, even colleges that offer scholarships. Several of our restaurant managers today have university degrees, something that seemed unthinkable when they first started. One of our most successful initiatives, and one I talk about little publicly, is the financing of vocational courses for young people from the community. It started small, funding a computer course here, an English course there. Today we maintain a complete training center, disguised as an NGO so as not to attract too much attention. Hundreds of young people have passed through it, many of them children of our own employees, learning professions that keep them away from the path that leads to crime. Why do I do this discreetly? Because West Baltimore has changed, but not as much as it seems. Trafficking still exists, although less overt. Militias have established themselves in various areas, and any initiative that could be seen as competition for young labor is viewed with suspicion by those who control the territory. So, we operate in the shadows, without fanfare, changing lives one at a time. Sometimes people ask me if I'm not afraid. Afraid of retaliation from the traffickers. Afraid of the police, who are still corrupt in many cases. Afraid that the past will come to light and destroy everything I've built. The truth? Of course I am. The fear never goes away completely, but I've learned that fear is like a strong wind. It can knock you down if you stand against it, but if you learn to sail with it, it can take you further. Fear has eyes and ears, my mother used to say back in the country when I was a girl. I only understood the full meaning of that phrase after living with Reggie. Fear makes you see dangers that don't exist, hear threats in innocent words. It paralyzes you, diminishes you, turns you into the smallest version of yourself. That's how I lived for so many years, cowering, silent, obedient, until the day I decided I'd rather die on my feet than continue living on my knees. And Reggie? Well, to this day, no one knows for sure what happened to him. The rumors have never completely stopped. From time to time, a new theory emerges. In 2010, an imprisoned ex-trafficker said that Reggie was alive in Mexico with a false name, married to a Mexican woman, and working as a bouncer at a nightclub. In 2015, another swore that he had been executed in Patapsco Valley State Park that very night, on the orders of a drug lord who had discovered a money diversion. Last year, a former resident of West Baltimore stopped me on the street to say he had seen Reggie's ghost wandering near the park on a full moon night. The truth, the real truth, no one will ever know. Or almost no one, because there are secrets we take to the grave, aren't there? What I can say for sure is that wherever he is, alive or dead, he never had the courage to come back. He never showed up again to break my arm, to threaten my children, to destroy what we built after he left the scene. And in the end, that's what matters. Not what happened to him, but what happened to us afterward. How we transformed the end of a horror story into the beginning of a story of overcoming. Every year, on the 15th of July, the date Reggie disappeared, I host a special gathering. I close the main restaurant to the public and bring together all the current and former employees who managed to rebuild their lives by working with us. It's a celebration, although many don't understand what we're celebrating. We call it Fresh Start Day. At this year's gathering, there were more than 200 of us women, some who have been with us for decades, others who passed through the company and went on to other paths, doctors, lawyers, businesswomen, teachers, women who, like me, were once at rock bottom and found a rope to climb up. In the middle of the party, Maria, one of the first I hired, now the owner of her own catering business, came to hug me with tears in her eyes. "Miss, Naomi, do you remember me when I arrived?" All bruised, with a swollen eye from being beaten, a missing front tooth because Sergio had knocked it out with a punch. I remembered, of course. It was hard to forget the state she had arrived in, dragging 2 small children, begging for any job because her husband had been arrested and his family had kicked her out of the house. "Look at me now," she continued, smiling with that perfect smile of someone who had spent good money on dental implants. "My own business, educated children, I even have a grandchild in college. All because you believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself anymore." I hugged her back, moved. "I only gave you the opportunity, Maria. You were the one who made it happen. But without that first chance, where would I be? Dead, probably, or worse." Stories like Maria's multiply every year. Women who arrived broken and are now rebuilt. Women who turned pain into strength, humiliation into determination. Women who, like me, were once treated like nothing and are now treated like queens, not by men, but by their own achievements. When I look back at that naive girl from the country, who was dazzled by an older man at a block party, I feel a mixture of compassion and pride. Compassion for what she suffered, pride for what she managed to overcome. The road was long, painful, full of detours and traps, but every step was worth it. The scars remain, of course. The one on my broken arm is the most visible. But there are other, invisible ones that only I know exist. On nights of heavy rain, when the wind beats against the windows, reminding me of the punches on the door, I still wake up scared. For a second, I still feel that old fear, but it soon passes. I take a deep breath, look out the window at the city lights below, and remember that I am safe, that we are all safe. My grandchildren, I have 5 now, 2 from Michael, 2 from Daniel, and a beautiful little girl from Liam are growing up in a completely different reality from the one my children knew. They study in good schools, travel on vacation, have opportunities I couldn't even dream of when I was their age. But I make sure they know our story. Not all the dark details, of course, but enough for them to understand where we came from and how we got here. Grandma, is it true that you were once poor? Gabriel, my 7-year-old grandson from Michael, asked me during one of these family talks. Yes, my love, very poor. So poor that sometimes I had nothing to eat. He widened his eyes in disbelief. But you have restaurants? How could you have nothing to eat? Because I didn't always have restaurants. Before, long before, I had nothing. And how did you get rich? I smiled at the simplicity of the childish question. Rich. In his eyes, with my comfortable house in West Baltimore? Yes. I never left the community, although I could have. My restaurants, my car with a driver, I was rich. And maybe I was, not for the money itself, but for the life I had conquered. By working very hard, my dear, and having courage when it was easier to be afraid. He seemed to reflect on that for a moment, then smiled. When I grow up, I want to be brave, just like you, Grandma. Those simple words moved me more than any formal compliment I have ever received. And there have been quite a few in recent years, since our story started appearing in reports, on television shows, in motivational speeches, the future. I still have many plans. At 68, I could retire, leave the business in the hands of my children, enjoy my grandchildren, maybe travel a little, something I've never done much. But the truth is, I can't stay still. I still wake up every day at 5-inch the morning. I still pass through all the kitchens to taste the seasoning. I still know by name every new employee who comes in. The next step is to expand to other communities. We already have a pilot project in another Baltimore neighborhood, a smaller restaurant, but with the same concept of hiring and training. Then we want to go to other cities, to all the places where women like me are still living stories like mine. It's not just a business, it's a mission. Because I know that in every project, in every dark alley, there's a Naomi huddled in a corner with her body aching from being beaten and her soul shattered from being humiliated. And if I can be the beacon that shows at least some of them that there is a way out, that there is life after hell, I will have fulfilled my purpose in this world. Sometimes they ask me if I have forgiven Reggie. It's a complicated question. Forgiving means many different things to different people. If forgiving is forgetting, then no, I have never forgiven. The marks he left, physical and emotional, are with me to this day. But if forgiving is moving on, is not letting hatred consume your life, then yes, I think I have forgiven, because I used the pain he caused me as fuel to build something bigger, something better. Another frequent question is, if I regret anything. If I could go back in time, what would I do differently? The answer is, surprisingly, very little. Maybe I would have run away sooner, the first time he raised his hand to me. Maybe I would have reported him, even knowing the police would do nothing. Maybe. But maybe is a luxury that women in violent situations rarely have. We do what we can with what we have at the moment we are living. What I know for sure is that July night in 2095, when the Hollow Eagle revealed its secret to me, was the turning point. It was when I stopped being a victim and started being the protagonist of my own story. It was when I transformed fear into planning, pain into determination, despair into hope. And if I am here today telling you this story, it's because I believe it can make a difference in the lives of other women, women who are right now, as you listen to me, living their own private hells. Women who think there is no way out, that they deserve what they are going through, that they will never be able to break free from the chains that bind them. To these women, my message is simple. If I could do it, you can too. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. It will require courage you don't even know you have. Strength you'll have to find from the depths of your soul. But it is possible. It's possible to leave. It's possible to start over. It's possible to turn the worst moment of your life into the first step toward a better life. And for those who are watching and thinking, "But she used drug money." That's not right, I say. Judge when you have 3 children to feed, a broken arm, a violent husband, no education, no support, no options. The money was dirty, yes. But what I did with it has washed every cent, every meal we've served, every job we've created, every life we've transformed. All this was possible because one day I had the courage to take what wasn't mine to create something that would belong to many. Life is made of difficult choices, and sometimes the choice is not between right and wrong, but between wrong and less wrong. Between surviving or succumbing, between saving yourself or losing yourself. I chose to save myself, and in the process, I ended up saving many others. Today, when I stand on a chair to show my scar to new employees, as I did at the beginning of this story, it's not to seek pity or admiration. It's to show that scars do not define who we are. Our choices after them are what define us. It's to say that a broken bone can heal crooked, but a broken life can be rebuilt whole. Different, perhaps, but still whole. I am Naomi Grace Washington, the woman who turned beatings into prosperity and fear into meal preps. If you want to hear more stories about women who refused to bow down to the men who tried to destroy them, subscribe to the channel right now. This is the channel for women who never bow down. If you believe in that too, subscribe now. We don't tell stories about princesses waiting for a prince. We tell the stories of ordinary women who fought to become queens in the middle of their own chaotic lives. Discover the stories of other women right on the screen. They, like me, have used their pain to forge strength and used humiliation as a launching pad for a brighter beginning. Because behind every story you hear, there are 1,000 voices being buried, and it's time for those voices to be heard.